I know it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's 100% what happened to me. About 24 years ago, when I was still relatively newly married, my then husband and I moved into a townhouse-style apartment. The 2 floors of our apartment were on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building, and the management office and mailbox area was almost directly below us. On the ground level, the woman who managed the building was older, didn't care for the property well, and usually spent most days chain-smoking Camel non-filters in her office. She was also a hateful old racist. She really resented that we had the townhouse, claiming we lied about my being pregnant when we moved in, because she didn't want to rent that unit to people with kids. She also made a few disparaging remarks about my husband, due to his race. She was a real peach, truly. So, after the kiddo was born, I was a som, just busy keeping the house clean, and the baby occupied without a car, or local mom friends. After lunch, the kiddo needed a bath. Anyone who's fed a 9-month-old baby food knows the mess that can happen. So, I went upstairs and ran the tub. Soon, I had the baby sitting happily, splashing in one of those suction cup bath seats that I was standing in the bathtub, getting ready to lift the baby out. When all of a sudden, the space heater started to rock back and forth, when it had not been rocking before. I had this horrible feeling of dread as I looked at the heater, and I just reacted because I knew I couldn't get both of us out of the tub in time. I reached down to grab the baby seat, ending up pulling it up off the tub and dropping the baby over the side of the tub to the bathroom floor, just as the heater got to the end of the cord. It thunked into the shower door, bounced off the edge of the tub, and landed on its side on the floor a couple of inches away, where it shut off because of its auto shut-off in case it got tipped over. When I looked over to the corner of the bathroom, that part of the room seemed to just get darker, like it was filling up with shadows. There was no smoke, no change in lighting, no windows, so no sun going behind a cloud, etc. It was just darker. I also started to smell cigarette smoke. Camel non-filters, which I knew the smell of well from being in Juno's office all the time to get things fixed. The smell was so thick it made me cough and my chest ached, but I couldn't see any smoke haze. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of hatred and malice, like someone was standing there giving me a death glare, that I grabbed the baby and a towel and ran downstairs. I was so freaked out. I couldn't bring myself to go back up there, so I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept the baby wrapped in the towel and cuddled up to stay warm. I stayed down there the entire rest of the day until my husband got home. Every so often, I'd look up the stairs at the bathroom, but I didn't want to take the baby up there, and I was afraid to leave him alone downstairs, when he asked me why the baby wasn't dressed. I told him about the heater and the smoke in the bathroom, and he went up to check, figuring it was yet another maintenance issue. There were no electrical issues, no damage to the outlet, no smoke, no cigarette smell. He put the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watched it for a few minutes, and it didn't rock, so it didn't rock itself off the counter earlier that he laughed it off. But later that day, we heard Juno's adult son downstairs near the mailboxes, yelling his head off at people. And that's when we found out she'd had a massive heart attack in her office earlier that day, and he'd found her dead in her chair, with a Camel non-filter still in her hand. We had never experienced anything paranormal until one particular night that still haunts me. We were sitting in Lexi's bedroom, chatting and doing what we usually did, when a bright light suddenly illuminated her window. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of motorcycles pulling into the gravel driveway. We assumed our parents had forgotten something and were returning. But before we could even get up to check, we heard a soft knock and a woman's voice say,
"Hello?"
The front door opened, and we heard the familiar scrape of the door against the hardwood floor. Panic set in immediately. This voice didn't belong to any of our family members. We all had very distinct Texan accents, and this voice was different, soft, almost melodic, yet unsettling. It had an otherworldly quality to it, as if it echoed from some distant place. We cautiously scouted the house, our hearts pounding with fear. To our horror, we found the front door wide open and the driveway empty. There was no sign of anyone in the house. Relief washed over us, and we convinced ourselves that we had imagined it. We walked back to Lexi's bedroom, but just as she was about to enter, she suddenly collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I was terrified and confused, unsure of what to do. Through her tears, Lexi managed to choke out that she had seen something as tall as the door frame standing in her parents' room. The figure she described was shrouded in darkness, its form barely distinguishable from the shadows around it. It had no discernible features, just an overwhelming presence that seemed to absorb all light. The air grew colder and heavier as she spoke, and a sense of dread filled the house. It felt as though we were being watched by unseen eyes. We were both paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend what was happening. The room felt colder, the air heavier, and a sense of dread filled the house. We stayed in Lexi's bedroom, too scared to move, until our parents finally returned. After that night, Lexi's family continued to experience strange, unexplainable events in their home. Lights flickered, doors opened and closed on their own, and shadowy figures appeared and disappeared. Whispers echoed through the halls, and objects seemed to move on their own. The activity became so intense that they eventually moved out, unable to live in constant fear any longer. The memory of that night stayed with me, a chilling reminder that sometimes, things that go bump in the night are far more real than we want to believe. Even now, I can still hear that haunting voice and see the dark figure standing silently in the shadows. That's better than when Genene Jones was working at the old petty ICU at the Bexar County Hospital. Babies were dying much too frequently. Many times, she would come in knowing just what to do for these babies that were crashing. They thought she was a fabulous ICU nurse. They didn't know someone was poisoning the babies with drugs to make them bleed out and go into cardiac arrest. It was a big deal in the early 80s and made national news when the killer was found out. A movie was even made about it. I think the best account I read about this was an investigative book by a reporter called The Death Shift. They called the perpetrator the baby killer. Nurses knew a lot of interesting stuff but were not believed about this because they couldn't exactly prove it. But imagine being there. Seeing these tiny, innocent lives slip away one by one. The hospital staff, baffled and horrified, trusted someone among them. This person was seen as a hero, rushing in at the last moment to save the day. But behind that facade was a cold-blooded murderer. Someone administered drugs like succinylcholine and heparin to these helpless infants. Watching as they bled internally, as their tiny hearts gave out. The nurses saw the pattern, the unexplained deaths, the strange behavior. But who would believe them? The supposed hero was well-liked, respected, even admired. To accuse them would be unthinkable. Yet the evidence piled up. The deaths coincided with the shifts of one particular nurse. The whispers among the staff grew louder. Until finally, an investigation was launched. The truth was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The hero they had trusted, the one they had admired for her quick actions and dedication, was Genene Jones. She had been the one taking the lives of innocent babies all along. For attention, for praise, for a twisted sense of control. The book, The Death Shift, delves deep into this chilling tale. It's a story that haunts the halls of Bexar County Hospital to this day.